Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Motes. On today's episode, we continue our journey with the scum and villainy of the Star Wars universe. I'm talking about the bounty hunters, the characters who live at the edges of the law, who aren't afraid to get down in the dirt, and who live by a code all their own. It's The Bounty Hunter Wars, The Mandalorian Armor by K.W. Jeter. And rejoining me to talk about the book, it's special guest co-host Jay. Jay, welcome back to the show. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are the Maple Leafs doing?
Honestly, I haven't really paid attention to the Maple Leafs in a couple of years. So if they get past round one, maybe I'll start paying attention to them again.
But they're still in it.
They're
I don't
still in
follow
it.
hockey, okay?
Yeah,
So,
they're still in round one right now.
oh, well, that's good. How's the temperature up there? Have you hit spring yet?
Yes, we have hit spring. It's actually been rainy all day today. We had a really nice day yesterday. That was nice, bright, sunny, not a cloud in the sky. So we're full in spring.
Things are looking good north of the wall.
They are looking good north of the wall.
Nice. Listener, if you're new to the show, Jay is one of the guest co-hosts from last season that joined me for the New Jedi Order series. If you haven't listened to those episodes, I implore you, go back, check them out. They were some of my favorite episodes of the podcast so far. But I wanted to invite Jay back for this series because he's a big fan of Star Wars bounty hunters. He's a big fan of Mandalorians, and he's a big fan of Boba Fett. Isn't that right, Jay?
I absolutely am. In fact, I've got my Boba Fett helmet here with me just in case I need to don it for this episode.
Previously, I did the Clone series with Kat because she's a huge Clone fan. And I wanted to bring someone on who enjoys Mandalorians and Boba Fett a little more than I do because I don't want to just sit here and poo-poo these books because they're not my favorite subject. Jay, what is it about Boba Fett, the Mandalorians, bounty hunters that really piques your interest?
I think Boba Fett for me was the fact that this was a character that only had like seconds of screen time in the entire series. Like I think he tops out at about 5 minutes in the entire original trilogy. But there was so many things that came afterwards, comics and stuff, that just made him such a badass. And I just fell in love with him, with the Mandalorian lore sort of surrounding him, and then we got books like the series you just covered, and they really deep dove into the Mandalorian culture, and they just always seemed like they accepted anyone, and it I don't know, it just there was something about it that was very wholesome about it, even though they love violence and but they seem to really care about their own.
Between Legends, between what we the fans made up in our heads following the original trilogy and even the prequel trilogy, and now Mandalorian culture in canon, mostly based off of what we've seen in the Clone Wars animated show and in the series The Mandalorian, there are differences. Some of them contradict each other, but in all, I kind of enjoy both interpretations of Mandalorians. What do you think? Do you have one that you prefer, or do both work for you from a certain point of view?
Uh, both. This is something that has taken me a long time to get accustomed to because when we first started getting the Mandalorian lore in the Clone Wars series, it was vastly different from what I knew. Mostly in Legends, the Mandalorians are a nomadic race. They don't actually have a planet. So the idea of Mandalore was more of a concept and where the clans decided to congregate. So I love that idea. But I also know that that doesn't really work when you need storylines of potential planets that are trying to stay out of a war or not engage with the rest of the universe, right? And sort of say, no, we have, like, we see it with the Hutts. We have our own space. We don't want encroachers. We have our own stuff. leave us alone. So I did end up liking that, but there was a major shift with, Satine and more of the peaceful aspect of the Mandalorian, the more political. That was new to me, and it took a bit of adjustment, but I've grown to like it.
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to getting your opinions on this book. But before we get into that, how about we take some listener questions? We have 2 emails today. The first comes from Robin.
Robin says, I watched all the Star Wars movies, and it makes me think there's a core problem with the franchise. The main issue is that the fourth wall that had separated the fans from the galaxy far, far away has long been destroyed. In the past, nobody talked about the private lives or opinions of Ray Park, Darth Maul, or Hugh Corshry, Captain Panaka. You must believe in the fictional characters, not look at their wiki posts of the actors. You should respect them, but never fall for the illusion that they are the same characters they play. That is why I like reading Legends more than watching the movies. Mara Jade in a novel will not be influenced by the personality of the actor or fans. What is your opinion of the situation?
Well, thank you very much for the email, Robin. It's a deep question, deeper than a lot of the questions we get here on the show. I think this one is it's a personal decision for every member of the audience. If you can compartmentalize the actor's private life or private opinions from the characters they play in shows or films, good on you. Some people can, some people can't. I would disagree with you that this is an issue, mainly because we didn't know nearly as much about the private lives and opinions of actors in the past. And we know now that some of them were pretty distasteful people. Should that affect how we see those actors now? Should that influence our opinions and whether or not we want to watch the stuff they were in anymore? Again, I think that's personal. Maybe some of these actors should have been called out for their behavior back in the 30s or the 40s or the 50s and just never were. I know that there are 1 or 2 actors for me that I just won't watch their stuff. Does that mean they're bad actors or bad in the films that I have seen them in? No. But from what I have heard them say and the opinions they've expressed, I don't want to give them my support by watching their films. But again, Robin, I think it's a personal decision. If you can compartmentalize, great. Jay, do you have an opinion on Robin's question?
I felt like you did. I felt like this was a very deep, this is not a simple answer. This is a very complex answer. The 2 actors that he referenced in his email or in their email, I'm not sure exactly what they're referring to, but we can use Cara Dune and forget the actress's name.
Gina Carano?
Yeah, I love the character of Cara Dune. I would love to see that character recast because her statements and stuff didn't fall in line with what the company believes and that you should be called out for things that make light of severe suffering of people. And there are repercussions for that. Whether that's a fourth wall break, I don't know. I think we have a culture that has, for most of Hollywood history, put actors on a pedestal, whether they deserve to be that or not. And I think we're at a time where a lot of that shifting, saying, okay, if we're going to put you on this pedestal, we're going to hold you accountable for your actions because there's a wider range of people that things have changed and you need to change with the times. So I think that that's going to be an ever-growing thing with Hollywood, and we're seeing it, and I think it's just a huge paradigm shift. I don't know that it's a fourth wall break. I still love the episodes of The Mandalorian with Cara Dune in it. The character is fantastic. I would love to see more. Maybe just find someone else.
Once again, Robin, thank you very much for the question. It really makes you think. Now, today's second email is from Charlie, who says, "Hello, Aaron. I have a few questions for you. First off, I must say that I loved what you did with the new Jedi Order series and that I enjoyed hearing the new co-hosts on the show, particularly the ones who were reading the book for the first time." Well, Jay, you weren't reading the books for the first time, but it sounds like Charlie, at least, was a big fan of everyone being on the show.
So happy to hear that.
Charlie continues, "If you cover Legacy of the Force and Fate of the Jedi series, are you planning on doing these with the gang as well?" Well, Charlie, I guess it'll depend where we all are in life when we get to that series. I had planned to do Legacy of the Force this year, but stuff in my life has gotten in the way. So I had to change up my schedule. Now I hope to do Legacy of the Force in 2025, and maybe that pushes Fate of the Jedi back to 2026. I would love to have co-hosts on for those episodes because both of them are 9-book series. You know, you guys don't want to hear me just drone on and on for 9 straight books about the same thing. You want other people's opinions. I hope to have people on. Jay, would you like to be on for either of those series?
Absolutely. Legacy of the Force is probably one of my favorites following the new Jedi Order. And, if I come back for Fate of the Jedi, I think I only read the first 3, maybe 4 books in that series.
I think it'd be interesting to get Scott on for Legacy of the Force, considering what he enjoyed in the new Jedi Order.
Yeah, I would love to see that.
And I think, depending on what might be happening on the Ahsoka television show, the Fate of the Jedi series might be pretty cool to cover in 2026.
Definitely.
So Charlie finishes up his email. "If you could have one piece of equipment from the Star Wars galaxy, what would it be? And if you couldn't be a human, which alien species would you be? Thank you for the show and stay well." Well, thank you for the email, Charlie. Jay, I'll let you answer this first. If you could have one piece of equipment and if you could be one alien species, what would they be?
One piece of equipment. I'm really torn because, who doesn't want a lightsaber?
I mean,
But
that's the obvious answer, correct? That's the one thing you have to have.
yeah, but me being a big Mandalorian guy, I definitely want a set of Beskar armor. Years ago, I played the Star Wars RPG game with some friends, and my character was a Mandalorian Jedi. So that would be my ideal.
And what alien species would you be?
Oh, that's a lot harder. There's so many. Um, I think my tops might be Chiss or a Zabrak.
Okay. I do think it would be easier just to conceive of myself as a near human alien species. Like, I don't think I could be like an Athorian, something that is nowhere near what a human is. I think imagining myself as a Chiss or imagining myself as a Twi'lek, something like that would be easier. And then, like I said, the one piece of equipment, it's got to be a lightsaber. It just has to. And, Charlie, I am going to do that because, as I said, my family has invited me to Disney World this summer, and I said the one thing I'm doing when I go down there is building my own lightsaber.
Jealous. I want to do that so bad. I see those videos and I'm like, I want to take my family there and do it. More for me than for them, but I want to do it.
I mean, and they ain't cheap. They are expensive to build, but I'm doing it. I'm going to have my own lightsaber. And listener, you can't see, but in the video chat that Jay and I are on right now, I've got a little shelf behind me with a few Star Wars knickknacks. My lightsaber is going on that shelf somewhere.
I angled my camera the wrong way because I have a nice Star Wars setup in behind me too. I have my Boba Fett helmet beside me, but I've got my Darth Maul lightsaber on the wall in front of me, and I've got a nice Empire Strikes Back movie poster that was apparently a rarity because it actually shows Darth Vader holding two lightsabers,
Nice.
which was apparently the original concept idea, and then they changed it.
Nice. Yeah, I've never bought a lightsaber. I know they have some tremendous replicas. I've always thought if I did, which ones would I get? And I am still just a sucker for the dynamic between the Skywalkers, you know, Vader, Luke, and Leia. I've always said if I did one, I would have like the original Anakin. Well, I guess not the original, the second Anakin lightsaber that was passed to Luke. And then I would have the Vader lightsaber and Luke's second lightsaber. And of course, now that we know Leia does have a lightsaber, it's a rose gold one, I think maybe that would be a fourth. Like that would be my little group, would be the Anakin, Luke, and Leia lightsabers, I think.
Do you include Rey because she's a Skywalker?
Well, I'm just talking about the father and his twins. I'm fine with Rey being a Skywalker.
Yeah,
I know some people don't like it,
I
but I'm
was
fine
just
with it.
asking because that she's a Skywalker. So
Sure, but I'm a child of the OT. You know, I got to have the OT stuff. So, well, thanks again for the emails, Robin and Charlie. Now, listener, if you have a question for the show, you can email me at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send a tweet at legendslounge1. And if you'd like to get your voice on the show, just record it in MP3 audio format. And coming up at the end of the show, we've got a listener's unpopular opinion to share with you. You're going to want to hang around for that. But now it's time for today's book, The Bounty Hunter Wars, The Mandalorian Armor by K.W. Jeter. Now, listener, before Jay and I start, just want to tell you that this story is written a little differently than most other stories we cover. It jumps back and forth between present day, which is just after Boba Fett escapes from the Sarlacc pit, and a few years in the past, just after the events of A New Hope. So to keep the summary from getting too confusing, and to honor the author, K.W. Jeter's original vision, Jay and I are going to split the story ourselves. I'll take the past plot line, and Jay will handle all the present day stories. Sound good, Jay?
sounds great.
Okay. It's going to be a little different. Hopefully, we don't confuse anyone. Listener, grab yourself a drink. Let's head in to the Star Wars Legends Lounge.
The story begins at the Great Pit of Carkoon. Dengar searches through the destruction of Jabba the Hutt's sail barge for anything valuable and stumbles upon a survivor, Boba Fett. Dengar hides the Mandalorian in a cave with a pair of medical droids, ordering them to keep Boba Fett alive. 2 days later, one of Jabba's dancing girls sneaks into the cave when Dengar is away. She says her name is Neela and orders the droids to take her to see their patient. When Neela sees the acid-burnt body, she gets a flash of her life before Jabba's palace. Neela doesn't understand the images, but she knows two things. Her real name isn't Neela, and somehow, the key to her past is Boba Fett.
Years earlier, the Hutts placed a bounty on one of their former accountants, a man named Neil Pasandum. Bosk took the bounty. His father Kradesk, the head of the Bounty Hunters Guild, forced his son to take a partner, a Gand named Zuckuss. Now Bosk and Zuckuss head to the casino where Pasandum was last seen. They break down the doors to the accountant's office to find nothing. Nothing, that is, except a big hole in the wall, and a few dead guards. Bosk and Zuckuss sprint back to the Houndstooth, just in time to see Boba Fett's Slave One lift off and jump to hyperspace.
The Kuat graveyards. Someone takes an interest in the recent events at Jabba's palace. Kuat of Kuat checks out a series of holo images taken at Jabba's palace. The technician isn't really interested in what happened to the crime lord. He's looking for something else. On the recording, Kuat of Kuat focuses on Boba Fett. He needs the Mandalorian dead, and he's about to do something about it.
Now Boba Fett delivers Nil Pasandum to the web of the Assembler, Kudar Mubat. The huge spider-like creature works as a go-between for many less than legal dealings. One of Mubat's subnodes, Balance Sheet, pays Boba Fett for the merchandise. Now when the Mandalorian turns to leave, the Assembler says he has a new contract to break up the Bounty Hunters Guild. If Fett breaks up the guild, the competition should raise the price for all bounties. Boba Fett agrees to take the contract, never asking who posted it. It's the leader of the Black Sun crime syndicate, Prince Shizor.
Dengar returns to the cave and finds Neela watching over Boba Fett. When the bounty hunter asks what she's doing, the former dancer tells him about having no memory of her life before Jabba's palace, but knowing that Boba Fett can help her remember. As Neela recounts her story, Dengar notices the dancing girl shows signs of an aristocratic upbringing and a memory wipe. Dengar tells Neela that Boba Fett is a killer. With Jabba's organization all but destroyed, Dengar says Neela is free. She'd be better off leaving Tatooine and never looking back. But Neela is adamant. She needs Boba Fett. The two start to argue when Dengar hears something outside. That's when the explosions begin.
When Boba Fett arrives at the Bounty Hunters Guild, he's welcomed with a feast. The banquet enrages Bosk, who doesn't trust the Mandalorian. He calls his father Kradesk a fool for admitting Fett into the guild. But Boba Fett says the new pressures in the galaxy force everyone to change, including himself. Fett volunteers to lead a band of hunters to find a Luanesi wanted by the ruling family of the Narant system. Boba Fett, Bosk, Zuckuss, IG-88, and a Niordi living cannon named Taharhin travel to the planet Circumtor to gather information on the missing Luanesi from the unscrupulous Shell Hutts.
Bombs continue falling on the surface while Dengar, Neela, and the two medical droids struggle to move Boba Fett deeper into the tunnels, beneath the dune sea. The explosions cause stone, sand, and dust to rain down around them. The group eventually makes it out of the bomb zone, and soon they find themselves in a large cavern. Neela sees an opening halfway up the rock wall. Dengar scales the wall and lowers a line back to Neela slowly, painstakingly slowly. Dengar pulls Neela, the droids, and Boba Fett out of the cavern. Now stranded in the desert, Dengar and Neela speculate about who was dropping the bombs on the caves. While they can't come up with a culprit, they soon realize the motive. Someone wants to make sure the Mandalorian remains dead. They start looking for another place to make camp, when suddenly, Boba Fett wakes up.
One of the Shell Hutts, Gita, invites the group from the Bounty Hunters Guild to the compound on Circumtor's surface, but forces them to leave their weapons on Slave One. When they enter the compound, Gita springs a trap, ordering a group of mercenaries to encircle the bounty hunters. Bosk and Zuckuss are confused, but Boba Fett isn't. He helped an architect escape the Shell Hutts years ago. Now Gita wants his revenge. The Hutt starts describing what he's planning to do to the Mandalorian when Boba Fett presses a button on his armor. Boom! There's an explosion, and the ceiling falls down around them.
Boba Fett orders Dengar to head into Mos Eisley. The Mandalorian needs some parts and equipment to fix the communications relay in his helmet. But Dengar has plans of his own. He sneaks into a cantina and finds an information broker. Dengar pays the broker a small fortune to send a message pod to the CEO of Kuat Drive Yards. Boba Fett is alive. But the broker isn't the only one listening in. A pair of local thugs overhears the message. They decide to follow Dengar back into the desert. If they can find Boba Fett and capture the Mandalorian, they can make a fortune.
The bounty hunters crawl through the rubble of the Shell Hut compound, grabbing blasters from some of the fallen mercenaries. Bosk, Zuckuss, and IG-88 start mowing down the mercs, but Bosk takes a bolt to the chest and falls to the floor. Boba Fett stays focused on Gita. Frantically, the Shell Hut tries to close up its armor, but Fett grabs Daharhan and shoves the muzzle of the living cannon into Gita's shell just before it fully closes. Boba Fett fires Daharhan, eradicating the hut inside its armor and killing the Niordi. After the battle, the surviving bounty hunters return to Slave One and head back to the Bounty Hunters Guild.
Dengar returns with the parts Boba Fett needs to fix his helmet. When the twin sun sets behind the dunes, the thugs from Mos Eisley ambush the camp. One of them holds Boba Fett, Dengar, and Neela at gunpoint, while the other covers his partner. The thug orders Boba Fett and Dengar to move away from their campfire, but he loses track of Neela. The former dancer jumps at the thug, kicking him in the groin, knocking him to his knees. But his partner starts firing, driving the group from the camp, forcing them to take cover in a nearby cave, trapping them. Dengar and Neela start to panic. Boba Fett tells them to calm down. He's got it covered. Pressing themselves against the walls of the cave, Dengar and Neela hear something beneath the sound of the blasters. The noise becomes a rumble. It's Slave One. Boba Fett fixed the comm in his helmet and called his ship. The fire spray gunship lands at the camp, crushing one of the thugs and sending the other running off into the dunes.
Returning to the Bounty Hunters Guild, Zuckuss reports back to Kratos. The old Trandoshan asks if the Gand followed his orders and killed Bosk. Yes, Zuckuss says. But why did you want me to kill your son? Kratos says the younger bounty hunters were threatening to change the guild, so he had to cull some of the rabble-rousers to maintain power. As Kratos lays out his plans for the guild's future, the door behind him slowly opens. It's Bosk. But you're dead, Kratos shouts. Hardly, Bosk says. He says he knew about his father's plan with Zuckuss, and now it's time the guild had new leadership. Zuckuss watches in disgust as Bosk rips open Kratos' throat and starts devouring his father, in true Trandoshan tradition.
The story ends in orbit above Tatooine. Bosk intercepts Dengar's message pod, reads the transmission, and sends it off to Kuat. Boba Fett is alive. The leader of the Bounty Hunters Guild can hardly believe it. Bosk was delighted after hearing that Boba Fett had been devoured by the Sarlacc. But he was a little sad he wouldn't be able to kill the Mandalorian himself. Now, as Slave One escapes Tatooine's atmosphere, the Trandoshan will have his revenge. Bosk fires his missiles at Slave One, then watches in awe as the ship explodes, destroying Boba Fett and ridding the galaxy of the dreaded Mandalorian bounty hunter.
Time to take a break. When we return, Jay and I will talk more about the Bounty Hunter Wars, the Mandalorian Armor. I'm Aaron Moats. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Thank you for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, where we celebrate the books from Star Wars Legends. But let me recommend a book from Star Wars canon. Jedi Battle Scars tells the story of Cal Kestis and the crew of the Stinger Mantis following the events of Jedi Fallen Order. The crew meets a former stormtrooper who has information that could prove crucial for the rebellion. But can the Imperial deserter be trusted? And can Cal evade pursuit from the evil fifth brother? Find out in Jedi Battle Scars by Sam Maggs. Welcome back into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats, and today, Jay and I are talking about the first book in the Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy, The Mandalorian Armor, by K.W. Jeter. Jay will get into some specifics here in a few moments, but I believe this is the first time you are reading the Bounty Hunter Wars series. So, what did you think of the first book?
Reading it, I realized I think I may have read it
Oh,
a
there you
long
go.
time ago. Yeah. But again, it's like the New Jedi Order where it seems like I've read it, but I have no idea what's happening. So again, it's kind of like reading it for the first time and sort of rediscovering it and, diving back into a time when these, three characters were huge characters in Empire.
Did you enjoy the book?
I did. I look forward to reading the next one.
This is the second time that I am reading the series. I will say that I think the second and third books are better than this one. This one, I don't know if it's the format, jumping back and forth between present day and the past, or what it is with it, but I think it's fine. There's just nothing about it that's really, I don't know, sexy for me when I'm reading it, if that's a good description.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying with that. It's like, it seems a little dry um, at times, and I think almost the bouncing happens back and forth a little too much. So it can be really jarring and hard to sort of follow.
I think the author's writing style in this one at points is just way too wordy. I like descriptive language. I like when an author takes the time to describe a scene. I like the times when an author goes in depth in conversations between characters. But there's a scene toward the beginning of the book where the Emperor is talking to both Vader and Prince Shizor. And when the Emperor asks Prince Shizor why he's interested in the Bounty Hunters Guild, it takes Shizor like 5 pages before he actually gives an answer. And even then, I'm not really sure what the answer was. I just thought it just seemed like it took a really long time before he actually told the Emperor what his plan was. And maybe that just rubbed me a little the wrong way at the beginning of the book, and it clouded my opinion for the rest of the book. At one point, I just thought, man, get with what you're going to say here, Shizor, or Palpatine, choke him out, just do something.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, and I remember reading that too. And my impression of it was that the author was really trying to make Caesar seem like he was aristocratic and not like the head of a criminal organization. So like he was like using all this like fluffy language and just to try and like almost like okay, like I'm bored now, like bore the emperor into like just get on with it. Like I don't care.
Yeah, and there are parts of the book, at least in that, whenever they mention Shizor, they mention that people know he's the head of Black Sun, but no one acknowledges it. It's almost like it's something you don't say because it's
We don't talk about Fight Club.
exactly. So I didn't have an issue with Shizor acting as though he was a high member of society and not also a crime lord. It just took so long for him to answer the question. That's what ticked me off.
I found myself a couple times throughout the book where I had to go reread sections of it because I was like really confused as to what happened because I was like, okay, I was here, and in like the span of like 2 or 3 paragraphs, like I was somewhere completely else in the story. I'm like, what just happened?
Right. But those are stylistic things that I'm not a big fan of. But you said you liked the book, so let's go over some of the things that you did like. And one of the things that I like too, I kind of like this mystery over the dancing girl, Neela. Who is she? Why is Boba Fett important to her? That's the kind of thing that I think works well when you're writing a trilogy, to introduce this at the beginning in hopes that there will be an answer later on in the story.
Yeah, I like that mystery kind of surrounding her, and even Dengar saying like, "I recognize you from Jabba's palace, but I have no idea what capacity you were there." And even her recollections, like, she talks about being in the room when when Ula got fed to the Rancor. Like, that's a massive scene in Star Wars that she's now suddenly a part of.
And she says that she remembers Ula being one of the few people that treated her nice in
Yeah,
Jabba's palace.
yeah. It's she's definitely a mystery, and I look forward to getting more of her story.
And as Dengar interacts with her, he mentions how she doesn't feel like your typical dancing slave. She feels like she was someone from a higher tier in society. That's just really interesting to me. Who is this person from a higher tier of society? How did she make it into Jabba's palace? And if Dengar's senses are correct, who wiped her memory and for what reason?
Yeah, and I do like the fact that he also acknowledges that she seems to have had some training, that she's not just helpless. She's survived in, one of the roughest environments in all of Star Wars, in the Dune Sea, by herself after everything around her has exploded. She's been in a couple of fights where she's held her own, and he's really confused as to how this person was a dancer.
Yeah. So we have this mystery. We also get kind of a secondary mystery. At this point, the second mystery isn't as interesting to me, but maybe it becomes more important. And that is why the CEO of Kuat Drive Yards wants to make sure that Boba Fett is dead.
Obviously, he knows that Boba Fett knows something that can take down him, or possibly
Sure,
his corporation that
but what is
he's
that
so fond of.
information?
I don't know, but maybe it's he's selling secrets to the rebels or something. Who knows?
Well, if you think about it, the way they describe the character, Kuat of Kuat, great name by the way, isn't confusing at all when you're reading it.
No.
His biggest client by far is the Empire. However, he does have some independence. He is still building and selling ships to other factions in the galaxy, and one would presume maybe one of those other factions would be the rebellion. And if Boba Fett has proof of that, that could definitely be some information that the Empire would want to know about.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I also can't remember who made Slave One, but maybe that has something to do with it as well. Maybe he's after that ship.
It could be. Could be.
Just speculating because I don't remember enough to actually
Yeah.
think that I'm anywhere near what's actually happening. But
Right. So, continuing the storyline in the present, after Boba Fett finally wakes up, he acknowledges the help that Dengar has given him and offers Dengar a partnership. Now, we do not know at this point what that partnership entails. Do you have any speculation as to what that could entail?
I really don't, especially knowing that and they make a lot of reference to that in the past, where Boba Fett doesn't partner with people. Boba Fett is a lone agent. So if he's willingly saying, "Hey, let's partner up," what is his end game in that? What is because we also know quite extensively that Boba Fett only looks out for Boba Fett. So what's in it for him?
Yeah, because when I hear the word partnership in this situation, I'm not envisioning they're just going out for another bounty and then splitting the credits. I don't think that's what Boba Fett means when he says partnership in this situation.
Yeah, I feel like it more means you have maybe it's just the fact that he has a ship that can get him somewhere, or a fall guy or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So we're going to leave the present right now and talk about some of the scenes in the past. There is one last little section of the present we're going to jump back to because that's the cliffhanger of this first book. But back in the past, the scene with Prince Shizor describing his plan to destroy the Bounty Hunters Guild wasn't our favorite scene. However, it obviously has relevance to the story. Why do you think Shizor wants the guild destroyed?
Because I think it gives him an edge. I think it means that, you know, instead of the Empire looking at the Bounty Hunters Guild as an asset, they'll look more to Black Sun because he can fill that power void. Because he's building his own underworld empire right underneath the Emperor's nose, who, supposedly doesn't know that it's happening.
Okay, I could see that, but other than the one scene we saw in The Empire Strikes Back where Vader hires a handful of bounty hunters to search for the Millennium Falcon, have we really seen the Empire use bounty hunters as a resource?
I think there was a lot of comics where they were used. There was a whole series I know that had IG-88 trying to almost capturing Han Solo in the bounty that he had both with the Empire and Jabba on I think it was Orton Mandel, and there was a series of Boba Fett comics and stuff. So I think there was a lot that happened post original trilogy, more so in the comics than anything else, with the exception of Shadows of the Empire, where it really focused on the bounty hunters. But bringing it into current stuff, the only time we've really seen bounty hunters used was the beginning of the Mandalorian, and the Empire did hire him to find Grogu.
Sure. I mean, yeah, they were the Empire. They were more of the Imperial remnant by
Yeah,
that point. But
but
yeah, you're right. They were still Imperial.
so I'm just saying that there may be something to that. It's just again they're supposedly that criminal element, right?
Right?
So we don't really get a lot of that story about that element in like it's little pieces. So we don't really know how much the Empire used them as an asset.
One of the things that I really enjoyed in the past storyline was the introduction of the assembler, Kudar Mubat, described as this huge spider like creature who lived in a nest that was also a ship and a world at kind of the same time. So it was interesting.
That
And
that was also a part of him
yes,
or part
yes,
of
it was
it.
also part of him. So I don't really know how big this thing is. I'm imagining kind of the size of a small apartment building, I guess.
Yeah, I had a lot of trouble trying to visualize that whole scene myself. I was just like, so is this like a web and he's inside?
That's the way I took it. It kept
Yeah.
describing it as a web.
And then they were like, he's very spider-like, but it's like a robot that,
Mm-hmm.
consumes. this one took power from consuming its former,
His parent, I
yeah.
guess.
And I'm like, so there was just a lot that I was like,
Right.
I tried to even picture this, like even like some kind of movie somewhere that, and the closest I could come to is like the Matrix and like the octopus like robots.
Yeah,
That's
maybe.
that's
Yeah.
about the closest I could come. Like just picturing the batteries uh in the Matrix and like the little spider things crawling and moving things. That's kind of the image that I got for it.
It's as close as you're gonna get. I kind of pictured the face huggers from the Alien series,
Yeah,
but also with a head that talked.
yeah,
So anyway, he is only here because he consumed his parent. His parent allowed him to grow large enough that Kudar Mobat kind of staged a coup and ate his parent. Now his little subnodes, they all have different names. You had Lookout. I can't remember all their names, but the main one is Balance Sheet. Balance Sheet is a little smarter because it has to balance the accounts. It has to be able to do a bunch of math. And quite a few times, Kudar Mobat says, Balance Sheet's getting a little too smart. Sooner or later, I'm going to have to consume it and create another one because I don't want to happen to me what happened to my parent. Does it seem to you that he keeps forgetting to do like he says I should do this, and then it's almost like the next scene that he's back, he said, you know what I should do? I should consume Balance Sheet at some point. And then a little later in the book, you know what I should do? I should consume Balance Sheet at some point. It's almost like maybe Balance Sheet is already knows what's going to happen and is getting more and more powerful.
it absolutely could be that. It could also be maybe he's just gotten so complacent that he's like, he does a lot, and I really don't want to take that on right now. So I'll leave him a little bit
Sure.
longer.
And you know, I'm kind of a lazy person too. I think I would be the same exact way.
Yeah, I don't like
But
doing math. He's good at it. I'll
yeah,
let him do it.
I don't know. Something tells me that Balance Sheet already is slowly taking over.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong in that. Just the fact that there was so much emphasis on balance sheet, I was like, there's something going on here.
Yeah. So the last part about the past storyline, the big part is Bosk and the other young bounty hunters basically staging a coup in the Bounty Hunters Guild and taking out Kradosk and taking out the older bounty hunters. I kind of enjoyed that story. I'm not going to lie. You know, even though I'm not as interested as the bounty hunters as other people, I like political intrigue. I like backstabbing. I like the infighting amongst families and political alliances. This is the kind of thing that's up my alley. What did you think of this storyline? Did you enjoy it?
I did. Again, I like Star Wars when we get outside of the normal stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the Jedi stuff. I love those struggles, but I love seeing the other aspects of Star Wars universe, right? I love seeing this criminal element. I love seeing the bounty hunters and their political strife. Like, it just makes the world feel more real, right? There's other factions. It's not just this and that. So yeah, I do. I love it.
And I liked how they introduced Zuckuss here as a brand new bounty hunter. Again, the past storyline is taking place just after the events of A New Hope. So we haven't gotten to those scenes with Zuckuss and Forlom in The Empire Strikes Back yet. So this is Zuckuss's introduction to the bounty hunter world. And while he is naive in certain aspects, he is smart enough to play both Trandoshans against each other.
Yeah, and I don't think either because both, he played that part really well of I'm just I don't I'm kind of fumbling my way through. And they that's all they saw him for. They're like, well, we're going to eat you at some point. And but again, I think that almost mirrors the assembler, right? Where it's this meek little thing, but I'll just leave it alone. It's not really harming me at the moment. And then, yep, hey, guess what? Surprise!
All right, so to finish up the book, we head back to the present storyline. Bosk arrives at Tatooine. He doesn't land on the planet, he stays in orbit. He finds Slave One in orbit. Now, this is just before Boba Fett calls it back down to the planet. On Slave One, he finds a recording. And that recording is Kuat of Kuat somehow learning and recording the destruction of the Lars family homestead way back at the beginning of A New Hope, seeing the bodies of Owen and Beru Lars, and seeing Luke Skywalker show up and seeing the destruction. Now, we had speculated earlier why Kuat may want Boba Fett dead. This could be the information as to why Kuat wants to make sure that Boba Fett is gone. Because it begs the question, the present day storyline takes place right after Jabba's sail barge is blown up. So how did Kuat of Kuat know to record this random Tatooine homestead 4 years prior?
That is a very good question. Um, wow. I don't know that I thought about that.
And that, your reaction right now,
Yeah.
is almost the same way I read Bosk's reaction in the book.
Yeah, because I'm just even trying to figure out how that was recorded, where it was recorded, who recorded it.
It was
Like,
some sort of droid, because Boba Fett had the droid in that back closet in Slave One behind that hidden panel.
hmm,
Bosk was able to find it.
wow. Yeah, that's
I guess I might be taking a leap saying that Kuat of Kuat is who recorded it. I guess we don't 100% know. We just know the recording is in this droid, and the droid has the markings from Kuat drive yards. That's all we know. I am inferring from that it was sent by Kuat of Kuat.
well, I mean, that's a good assumption. Maybe he's also just trying to not have his name attached to something that, shows that the Empire did that, because the Empire hit the Jawas, so maybe the droid was on the sandcrawler.
Could have been. And of course, at the time that the recording was taken, nobody would have known who Luke Skywalker was.
No.
Bosk sees the recordings. This is now middle of Return of the Jedi. The face of, this person who blew up the first Death Star, the face of this person that Darth Vader has been hunting for, is now out there. So that's how Bosk knows it, but he's now looking at the face 4 years younger. That might be, for me, the most interesting part of the story so far.
Yeah, like that's like getting a Wayne Gretzky rookie card before realizing how good he was, right? Like, know?
Or the question is, did someone know who was on that homestead?
Yeah. I mean, that that's entirely possible. If let's throw in some of the new canon in there where, Riva showed up at the homestead from in Obi-Wan Kenobi. That means the Imperials would have a record of that.
Yeah.
So,
I'd have to go back. I don't have the book right with me. Do you have the book near you?
yeah,
What was the publishing date on the book?
the original was 1998.
So that's prior to the prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. Like I said, I've read this series once before. I don't really remember a whole lot about it, but I remembered that I enjoyed the second and third books more. I'm hoping this storyline continues through the second and third books.
I'm sure it will. I'm sure we're probably going to get more information about stuff like that. I mean, it's dropped for a reason, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're definitely going to get more of Neela, and I think we're definitely going to get more of these characters that were introduced. But this is the part of the story that's most interesting to me. What did Boba Fett know about Luke Skywalker?
That is a very interesting question. And again, we've seen in this too that Boba Fett also doesn't go after people unless there's money involved, right? We got that little snippet in one of the new Jedi Order books when Boba Fett ran into Han and he was like, "Listen, that was just a job. It was nothing personal." So if he had no personal investment in it, then you know maybe he was just waiting for the opportunity of, hey, here's the bounty.
Well, if we go by legends, we know that in Shadows of the Empire, Prince Shizor was trying to undermine Darth Vader by getting assassins to kill Luke Skywalker before Vader could capture him. But at this point, I don't know why there would be a recording of Luke at the homestead during the events of A New Hope, because Shizor doesn't learn who Luke is until after the events of Empire Strikes Back. I mean, I could see Shizor being behind it, but I don't know if that explains this particular thread.
Yeah. I do want to say though that I was so happy. This is one of those things that I forgot that Shizor was even in this, and I was so happy to see him come back, after Shadows of the Empire and have a bit more of a role than just a one-off sort of villain.
Well, you're only going to see him in the past,
Yeah.
because by the events of Return of the Jedi, he's dead.
Yeah.
He's gone. So,
But I just want to say that because I that was a character I liked, and I was really disappointed when he didn't make it.
all right, folks, it's almost time for Jay and I to wrap up. But first, we've got a listener's unpopular opinion to share. Jay, would you read Mark's unpopular opinion?
I absolutely will. Mark says, due to being powerful with the Force and having an ear in every room in Coruscant, I think that Emperor Palpatine would have found out about the Yuuzhan Vong before they were a threat. Perhaps being guided by the Force, Palpatine saw that the only way the galaxy was to survive was under one unified leader with a heavy influence on military doctrine. He knew what was coming and built things to combat this incredible enemy, like the Death Stars and Super Star Destroyers. He knew the Force would not help him, but ships and troops would. I believe that Emperor Palpatine was the real hero of the galaxy, and the rebels were short-sighted and true enemies of the state. We know that Sith put plans in place years, decades, and even centuries before an event they're planning for. I would love to know what you think about this too.
Thank you very much for the email, Mark. I don't normally comment on the listeners' unpopular opinions. I think that's kind of for them to just put out there. That's But since you specifically ask what Jay and I think about your opinion, I will say that there are some stories in Legends that imply that Palpatine did know about the Yuuzhan Vong threat, and that Palpatine was doing some things to prepare for the Yuuzhan Vong to return to the galaxy. I would say I absolutely disagree with the second part of your opinion that Palpatine was the real hero of the galaxy and that he built the Death Stars and the Superstar Destroyers and any of his other things in order to simply make the galaxy a safe place. Jay, what do you think of Mark's opinion?
I agree with the early part that I don't know that Palpatine would have let the Yuuzhan Vong get as big a foothold as they ended up getting in the New Jedi Order, and that was even said in one of the books. I believe even Wedge decided to use the Empire's tactics, but I forget what character said it, but they basically said that if we had run into the Empire that first excursion, we would have been eliminated. Now, did Palpatine make these weapons of mass destruction for that purpose? No, I don't believe that at all. I don't believe he was doing anything altruistic with that technology and stuff. I think he was completely an authoritarian dictator that just wanted everything under his control as much as like he possibly could. And he used whatever means he could make, manipulate. A lot of the Legends book talk about how he was almost like a force puppeteer on people and could control mass amounts of people and their way of thinking. So no, I don't think he was a hero at all. I don't think that the rebellion was short-sighted in removing that. Um, I think the New Republic's biggest problem was that they wanted peace and didn't want to consider a military option when the Yuuzhan um, incurred into this universe.
Thank you again for the email, Mark. Now, listener, if you have an unpopular opinion that you'd like to share, email me at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send a tweet at legendslounge1. And keep sending in your favorite Star Wars character groups, your fighter squadrons, Mount Rushmore, road trip crews, sabacc games, mixtape, whatever. And if I've said something on the podcast that you disagree with, let me know. I love reading the things you listeners come up with. Jay, it's just about time to go. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I love talking Star Wars with you, Aaron. It's always such a blast.
Now, if the listeners want to get in touch with you, or if they want to listen to Animated Antics with you and Kat, how can they do that?
Animated Antics you can find on Spotify. I believe we're on Amazon, and we've tried to get on Apple a couple of times, but it hasn't really panned out. We can also be found on Twitter at JandCat1, Instagram and Blue Sky at Animated Antics Pod, and you can email us at animatedantics0@gmail.com. And we talk about all sorts of animated shows. We just recently did Avatar Season 2. I think we're going to be doing Incredible Season 2 next. And yeah, we have Tales of the Empire coming out and Bad Batch wrapping up. So I'm sure we'll probably be covering those as well because we love a galaxy far, far away and the wonderful characters and stories that we get from there.
Coming up on the next episode of the Star Wars Legends Lounge, Jay and I will be talking about Book 2 in the Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy, Slave Ship by H.W. Jeter. You can look forward to that episode coming out May 17th. Thank you so much for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. I'm Aaron Motes. May the Force be with you. And remember, there's always a bit of truth in legends.